USC and UCLA, they love her to pieces. And then we end up in hospice, and they love her to pieces in hospice. And it just seemed like everywhere she went, she touched people's lives because she had such a humble spirit about her that she never wanted it to be about herself, and she always wanted to be the helper. We'd go to people's houses for a Christmas party or a birthday party or something, and everybody gets done and they migrate to another room. All of a sudden we realize, where's Kathy? Oh, she's in the kitchen doing the dishes and trying to put everything away, so whoever hosted it wouldn't have to clean up, that Kathy would have already taken care of all of that. And in a nutshell, that's how she was. I have a story I'm a little bit reluctant to share, but I think it just kind of, and I hope I can survive this part of this, but when she was in hospice, maybe just a few days before she passed away, she got really weak. And she wasn't really talking anymore, and Kathy's sister had left, and she had kind of decided that, you know, she knew she was going to pass, and there were some things going on that I'm hoping to be able to purge my memory of because it was horrible. But and I don't mean to get into, I'm not going to get into any detail, but the nurses came in every 3 to 4 hours. They wanted to turn her because I guess you'd get bed sores or something if you're not at least rotated back and forth. And we hadn't heard a word from her in a couple of days. And the two nurses walk in, Kathy, honey, we're going to rotate you, okay? And so one nurse goes on one side, and they had this padding or something underneath her. They could kind of lift her and scoot her and put the pillows on the other side. And all of a sudden, she raises her hands up and she goes, wait. And everybody's like, wait. And the nurse leans over, she goes, Kath, what is it? And she looks up and she goes, what can I do to help? And I think the nurses lost it at that point. But that was her. Even to the end, she was like, no, this isn't about me. This is about what I can do to be helpful. But the thing about Kathy is that she always wanted to be obedient to God, and she never wanted to be a disappointment or a burden to anybody. And we actually had the chance to share up front here on a Wednesday night to give our testimony right after Kathy was diagnosed. And one of the verses we used was Romans 8:28, where it says, and we know that all things work together for good to those that love God, to those that are called according to his purpose. And I said up here, it doesn't say all things except for stage 4 colon cancer. So we know somehow in this, we know that God's going to use this for his glory. And his glory is eternity, not our 60, 80 years here on earth. And in Jeremiah it also says, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. The plans are for good and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. And Kathy reminded me of that verse. And she said, even in this, the Lord is going to do amazing things. And it's not about now, it's about forever. Anyway, there's after me, there's a PowerPoint video that it was tough for me to get through because it's all the pictures of Kathy in our happy times. And I hadn't realized how much she deteriorated till I had to start going through pictures to see the happy times. And I was actually thankful for that because it sort of purged the last few months of all of this. And my latest memory now is all of these pictures and fun times. But there was one night when I would sit up with her till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, just holding her hand, rubbing her hands. She was sleeping on the couch downstairs and couldn't go upstairs, so we had moved her downstairs. And she didn't want a bed, she didn't want inconvenience, she just wanted her couch. So I would sit on another couch that we had, and I would just rub her hands, and I would read to her, or I would pray with her, or we would watch some of her favorite shows like Maverick and what was the other one? The Andy Griffith Show. We watched a lot of Andy Griffith shows. And so we had them on DVR, so we'd watch those at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5, 6 times in a row. And one night I was spent, emotionally just spent, and I'm thinking, Lord, I can't do this. I can't take this. You're going to have to give me strength in this. And so when we had put the video together that is going to be up on the screen with pictures of Kathy, At first I wanted to do one of the songs that she started playing for me after she started Sing I Love You, which was Crazy Love by Poco, and she loved that song. And I was listening to that and I thought, you know what, I think I want to do the song that actually has a lot of meaning to us in this journey. And it's a song titled It Is Well, and it's done by Christine DeMarco. And I had never heard that version before until I searched it. And in the words it says, even with this mountain that's in front of me, even though my eyes can't see, through it all, my eyes are on him. So we were focusing on the Lord and what the Lord would have in this because it was bigger than all of us. And then it goes on to say, it is well with me, it is well with my soul. And I went to bed and I heard that song for the first time and I wept, and I played that song about 10 times, weeping the whole time. And I actually came down a few days later, I played it for Kathy, and she said, wow, that's really encouraging, because even though we're facing all of this and it's not going the way we were hoping it would, we know that the Lord hasn't forgotten us in all of this. And even if this doesn't go the direction we're hoping, we know that God has this. And in going back to Romans 8:28, where it says, and all things work together for good, even this is going to work together for good, because we know that Kathy's legacy in her life is out there. And she loved everybody here. In fact, I told some of the doctors and nurses when they were coming in that worked with her, I said, I'm almost thinking, I don't realize how much you guys, they'd come in and they'd be crying too, how much you guys love Kathy. And I thought, should I be jealous of this? I don't know. I mean, this is, she spent more time at work than she did at home. And I'm thinking, wow. Anyway, the good news is I've run out of notes. So this song that's going to play with the music, I only just tagged it in a few nights ago into the video. And if you listen to the words of it and you see Kathy in there, it's tough for me. I mean, and I hope it makes sense to you, but it really touches my heart. So I wanted to share it with you. So it's from Kathy and I. Thank you.
It was a great trip we had, wasn't it? It was a great time. Kathy wasn't sure she could go to Israel. We kind of encouraged her. We said, well, we have wheelchairs. We'll push you around if that's what you want to do. And I don't think we ever had to dig it out. She did it every day. Just got up and went, and God blessed. I think there are probably few things in your life and in mine that stop you in your tracks. Death is one of them. Whatever annoyed you before doesn't annoy you now because there's something more important you're thinking about. And life and death are pretty important issues. We get caught up in all of the little things. This trumps them all. The loss of people we love usually forces us to consider how we're living. Should we have called more often? Were we kind enough? What if I'd only made an extra 10 minutes to stop by? And we begin to kind of look at our own life and the way that we live it. And I hope that the memories you have of your relationship with Kathy were good ones. Death at any age causes you to question life, I think. Why them? Why now? What about me? My wife died at 25 years old. I had a 2-year-old son and a 4-year-old son. I had just graduated from UCI with a degree in microbiology and had just been accepted to med school. So that was my plan. A lot of you work in the hospital, so you know about those kind of plans. And yet with the loss of my wife, obviously those plans went awry. She died over 11 months at the City of Hope in the midst of a bone marrow transplant. And I remember driving home from the hospital in my car alone and saying to the Lord, she wasn't on my list. There's a lot of people on my list you can take. In fact, a few people I'd like to put on the list for you to take. But she wasn't on it. Pastor Gerard, who led us in worship, his wife died at 26 years old. He also was left with a young child to raise, so we have a lot in common. We're both Dutch, and we both were widows at an early age. My grandmother was in her 80s. My mom and dad immigrated from Holland, so they worked 2 jobs just to get, us food and shelter, and they worked hard. My grandma raised us. In high school, when I came home from a date, I always had to breathe on Grandma. She wanted to know if I'd been messing around or not. She always threatened that if she caught me doing the wrong thing, she was going to tell my father, who would probably kill me. And if not, I got hot dog sandwiches, which was quite a bit. I did pretty good. When she died at 88 years old, I said to the Lord, she wasn't on the list. And I learned something over the last 40 years as a pastor. When people die that you love, they die too young. Doesn't matter how old you get, you just need another week, another day, another hour. We don't want to let go of anybody that we care about. So, usually the hardest thing at funeral is this idea of the permanence of death. What comes next? The door seems closed, the handle is on the other side. And if that were the case, I would be the most miserable as well as you should be. You're at a funeral, a place most people like to avoid. They come out of the goodness of their heart. No one goes, hey, I'm not doing anything tonight. I want there's a funeral somewhere. We like to avoid even thinking about dying and death. And yet, pretty much common demand, hundreds, batting 1,000. Job, who was a man who lived in the days of Abraham in the Bible, was a man that God described as there was no one like him in all the earth, faithful to God in all of his ways. When you begin to read the book of Job, he was a man that loved God, he served God, he had a wife and 10 children, he submitted himself to the Lord. Even when his kids grew up, he would get up every morning and begin to pray for his children. One day, 3 separate runners came with news that his children had died, all 10 of them in one day. Some through accident, some through natural disaster, some through violence. Job tried all that he knew to do to hang on to his faith in God. The Lord has given them to me. The Lord can take them away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's what came out of his mouth. But all you have to do is keep reading to realize that though he said those things, man, believing that at this point was almost impossible. His wife was much more pragmatic. She said, we should just curse God and die if he's going to treat us like that. For 14 chapters, Job and his so-called friends tried working it out in their understanding. The goodness of God, the purposes of God, the struggle with the loss, how horrendous it was. In chapter 14, verse 14, Job then comes to what has to be the pivotal verse in the book. He said to the Lord out loud, if I knew that my children could live again, I could bear the grief. If this isn't all there is, then I will, in all of my years of hard service, wait until that change comes for me as well. Job discovered, and millions after him, that God has a plan that is beyond this life, that he makes promises to us that will allow us to know what comes next, and that we can look forward even though we have to deal with loss. When Paul wrote to the Thessalonian church, who were getting older and people were dying and the Lord was coming and they didn't want to miss it, they grieved, and Paul said, look, don't grieve like those who have no hope. Follow the Lord. It often, I guess, takes tragedy and loss for us to consider how fragile life is. I think that you're fooling yourself if you think you're looking better as you age. You aren't. You get about 19 and you're going downhill, I'm pretty sure. I used to have beautiful long hair. I just want you to know. I look good in it. Look at me now. There's a reason why your eyes go when you're older, so you don't have to see what you become. That's how death works. We're just slowly dying, aren't we? Some of us might live to be 100. Grandma got to be 88. My wife got to be 25. We're going to die. We're going to die. And I remember when my wife passed away, being so young, and I was in church teaching, that we had several thousand people come to her funeral, and the people that were there loved us. We were friends, and they wanted to say the right thing. Maybe that's what you're worried about saying to Randy tonight, the right thing. What is the right thing to encourage him? So people would come up to me and they would say, your wife is much better off now. To which I replied, yeah, thanks. Wasn't very helpful or very encouraging. Somebody said to me, well, things will get better with time. And I guess that's true. Some pain kind of numbs out after a while, but I don't think I was ever the same. None of those things helped me at all. Even though I knew it was true, she was much better off. She had leukemia. She suffered. She went through 3 surgeries. But it didn't help me. Let me tell you, as a young Christian man, what did help me. I read John chapter 11. It is a story of a couple, actually 3 kids, who came to know Jesus, Mary and Martha and Lazarus. They were convinced of who he was, even at a time when most folks rejected him. They were sure that he was the promised Savior, the Messiah that was coming. When Lazarus got sick, the girls did the smart thing. They said, go get Jesus. He can fix this. Except Jesus didn't come. Days passed. Lazarus died. Jewish practice, he was buried the same day, wrapped up in spices, put into the grave. Jewish custom, everyone stayed at the house for a week with the surviving sisters to comfort them. 4 days in, Jesus comes rolling into town. Martha, type A in the group, can't wait to get mad at him, runs out of town, catches him on the road, and blurts out, "If you'd have just been here, my brother wouldn't have died." They'd seen him open the eyes of the blind, heal the lame, deliver from leprosy and demon possession. When we need you, you're not there. Jesus said to Martha what has to be the most important answer of all, even from Job's standpoint. Jesus didn't say, "Martha, your brother is much better off now." And I was so glad, because I hated to hear that. Or things will get better with time. He said, "Your brother will live again. This isn't the end of the line." And Martha didn't feel like that was enough. She said, yes, I know, Lord, on the last day at the resurrection. And Jesus turned to her and looked her in the eye, loved her, the Bible tells us. And he said this, "Martha, I'm the resurrection and the life. If you believe in me, even if you die, you're going to live. And Martha, if you live and believe in me, you'll never die." In other words, death won't be to you what it is to everyone else. But then he said these most important words, "Martha, do you believe that?" Because any comfort that Jesus was going to provide for this brokenhearted sister was going to have to come in the form of her understanding of who he was and why he'd come. Now she said this, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you're the promised one that was to come." Jesus said this to her, "Then come with me, and I will show you my glory." Literally, I'll put on display for you who I am. Didn't do that very often, but he told her that to her face. They headed for the graveyard. They had to pass the house in Bethany where Mary and Martha lived. Mary came out of the house as they went past. She was much more demure, much more quiet. She came out though and she said the same thing, "If you'd have just been here." I don't know if Martha was going, "I tried that already." Jesus began to weep. I don't think he wept because he was worried about if he could handle it or if he could fix it. He wept because he saw in Mary and Martha the hopelessness of facing loss without having an assurance. It couldn't be any worse. He didn't say anything else. He just headed for the graveyard where he commanded the men that were there working that they should roll the stone away from the cave mouth to which Lazarus had been placed in. Martha complained, "Lord, he's been in there the better part of a week. That wouldn't be a good idea." And Jesus said, "I thought I told you if you believed in me, you'll see my glory." When they rolled the stone away, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out of there." And the poor man, wrapped up like a mummy, came stumbling out of the grave. The Gospels don't record the girl's response. I suspect maybe they went down and fainted. I don't know.